Yo, yo, yo. It was a hot night. Backyard, pretty girls in the moonlight, sitting around the fireside singing songs and getting along.
Okay.
They work
We
their
had
magic
nerds
because
and jocks
they take
pressing
a
yachts.
hangry customer and they freaking work magic, work service, and they turn that into a freaking fat tip at the end. Now, you can't control every single, like, person's income and the amount they can tip, but what you do have control over and what you can have a talent for is taking someone who's hangry and fucking getting them to squeezing out some freaking money out of them.
Yeah, turning them into someone that's happy.
And so people who can do that, you have to, like, think in their daily lives, they know how to manage stress. But, like, for them, like, what may be stressful for a normal person is probably even less stressful for them because of the nature of work, too. That direct interaction with a guest who's freaking upset, hungry, in a hurry, like hoping that it doesn't take long to get food because they're hungry right now.
It's kind of like how, like, when you exercise a lot, like going running and pushing yourself a little farther than you did the time before, or lifting weights and, like, really just feeling the pain and burning your way through it. That I think it can help make the rest of life feel a little bit easier, like forcing yourself to do those really challenging things.
Right.
And so I guess the same thing could apply to servers that just have
Navigate,
to put up, anyone in customer service that has to put up with, like,
I think so,
the worst bullshit.
But like, wouldn't you agree that there's different degrees of customer service? For example, would you say that excuse me, would you say that the customer service skills you need to be a cashier at a grocery store are the same customer service skills you would need to deal with livid tenants or guests? You don't have to interface so much with people who are angry when it comes to be a grocery store. It's like someone who's upset about the price, but, like,
when you're a server, you have to suck it up, like, the whole time.
Exactly. Your
you
face
can
is
never
there.
be right.
That is you, and it's your responsibility. It's not the grocery store owner or the restaurant owner. It's like you. And I think that takes someone who's got, like, you can call it thicker skin. I call it, like, a hospitality nerve.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like you have to tap into that. You have to tap into that selflessness. It's like, I am not a person.
I'm here to serve.
Ego. Exactly. It's like, I've done my job when I fixed this problem. This has nothing to do with me. And I think that's one of the hardest things that you have to accept in hospitality is that customer complaints, they are so often, and they are so part of the nature of hospitality that cannot be some offhand thing that happens to you at your peaceful job where everything's peaceful 365 days a year, and then all of a sudden somebody out of nowhere one day of the year just freaks out. No, in hospitality there's a freak out every single day.
Right.
And that is the nerve you tap into, the one where it's like, this is part of the job. And it renders all of the things in life a little bit less stressful, I think, when you go to, like, normal life, because of you working around things to make sure that they're not stressful, because you do it for a living. You solve problems for a living.
Solve problems for a living.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think any customer service job really pushes you to that. It's not a skill you have to use in a lot of other places. Like, most of the time, if someone's being rude to you to your face, you can just tell them to fuck off.
Yeah.
But not in any kind of hospitality or customer service job. You have to they're right, and you've got to find a way to make it work, even though they're wrong. But you have to pretend like they're right while solving the problem on the back end.
But, like, I wouldn't say, I never want to disparage a job. I want to make that clear before I like speak about it. But I wouldn't say, like, when I think about going through fast food, and you can have good and bad experiences with fast food. You can tell in someone's tone who fucking doesn't want to be there, take your order, really want to help or anything at all. Versus people who are going to greet you really well and the whole transaction is going to be really smooth. but there's such short transactions is that they can really do it with just changing their tone. They run through so many customers all day, and the transaction is so fast that you can have that robotic tone, and you can get away with that. But with, I would say, definitely my job, and I would argue yours too, you are oftentimes not only the face of solving the problem, but you're also responsible for it too.
Right.
And that is not something you let any employee do. That's only the people who have experience with something like that. But our jobs, they have that on a regular basis. It's not an abnormal thing. It's a pretty regular thing throughout the year. It's almost as if it should be part of the job description. That you're like also kind of psychiatrist. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That you have to manage this.
Just to make it clear to the listeners, I'm a property manager, and
I work in the housekeeping department at a hotel.
Yeah. So you're right, though.
Yeah.
Like it's more complex than anyone could ever tell you in a job interview or on an application or a description, because you're dealing with human minds that you have to navigate and help solve specific problems that you can't necessarily solve with them in front of you to their faces, but you have to let them know very clearly that you're working on it, you're solving it, and then you have to find a way on the back end to solve it the way that they need it to be solved.
And just so people understand, the nature of these problems isn't a standard list. Like, it would be really easy if you could say customers are going to come in with these 50 complaints and these are the 50 responses.
But every single day there's a new type of problem you've never encountered before that you have to use your problem solving skills to solve.
Have to try to like cooperate, try to find some middle ground, or maybe you do have to use a rule, maybe you can be flexible, but again, this is all improvised. These are improvised problem-solving skills.
That's something you can't teach.
And it's really hard to teach.
Yeah.
And it's not for everyone, because some people may get frustrated with how often you have to use your brain for this kind of thing.
But me personally, that's why this job it's so stimulating, and like the reason I've stuck in it for so long is because that ability to constantly have this new problem to solve, I really love. Like, as frustrating as it is sometimes in the moment of solving those problems, it is stimulating as hell. Like, the way that it's actually forcing your brain to use all your critical thinking skills and your problem solving skills, and constantly running into issues that have never happened before. You've never run into anything like it in your life. So you have to really just think very critically about how am I going to solve this? And being in charge is that next level of pressure. Like, being the boss, or, you know, whether you're an assistant manager or a manager of whatever department, being kind of that last line of defense where you don't have anyone that you can take the problem to, really, because you're the boss.
Yeah, so you'll make the call there.
You have to be the one to make the decision, whether it's right or wrong. Sometimes you have to make the decision, and sometimes it's wrong.
It makes them happy or unhappy, but
and then it's your responsibility to fix whatever you did wrong. But that's a skill that I think not a lot of people have, is being able to not really know exactly what the right decision is, but still having to make a decision.
And you know what? It's true. Those kinds of unteachable skills I always notice they really just come down with experience, because in a way it kind of emphasizes the critical thinking and the emotional intelligence that somebody can have, because you have to experience making good and bad decisions. But the thing is that there's only so many bad choices you can get away with before someone has decided that maybe you're not fit for it. And so that's another thing. Like I said, it's not for everyone, because it's not that you get lucky, but it's kind of that you knew how to navigate it to get up there. And so that's kind of the thing, is like navigating improvisable situations is just not, it's not teachable. You just kind of, again, you have experience. And like, I just want to mention that because like we're having trouble hiring, and it's just really hard.
Like,
to
are
find
you
people
having trouble finding people to apply, or just good applicants?
Yeah, no, just like on top of anything, experienced applicants, but just people in general, because there's a lot of positions to fill, but it doesn't seem, it's like, I doubt it's not like in the city where it's like you have a pile of applications and you could just have people come in and come out and fire people. It's kind of like you have a few applications and they have limited schedules as well. So it's kind of like, are you looking for that, or do they not really, looking for PM, looking for AM? They're open between this erratic schedule. No, we're not looking for anything like that.
They're also bartending.
Exactly. And so aside from the limited number of people you can hire, they themselves have a schedule that limits what you can have and any experience limitations or experience that they have. Again, it's a combination of a lot of stuff. It's not that very many people to pick out of.
I agree. I have the same problem whenever I'm hiring any position. I think that's just the nature of living in a small mountain town.
I think so.
Plus, with COVID, it's just super weird because people don't want to move. They don't want to like have a huge life change in the middle of all this uncertainty. So you have to kind of hope that you can hire someone that happens to live right around here who has the exact skill set that you need and the experience you need. And if you do have someone that's moving from far away, it's a lot of pressure because you don't want them to make a huge life change and maybe it doesn't work out. And, during their trial period, they're not a good fit. And then they've up and moved from another state to come here to work, and you have to let them go. Being the boss, it's this whole other level of responsibility, like where you're, for the first time, impacting people's livelihood, and like you're making a giant impact on people's lives with every decision you make,
right?
Whether it's as the hiring manager or as when you're having to discipline someone for some wrong action they've done, or making sure to encourage people that are maybe going through a hard time and they're not enjoying their job very much, finding ways to keep them motivated and passionate. There's so much that goes into it. So anyone that's in any kind of managerial position, man, if you're doing it and you've sustained doing it for a long period of time. We understand.
The struggle is real.
Yeah.
Yeah, and millennials,
it's not easy.
And millennials right now are getting into those positions, have been. And it's kind of like, I think one thing I've kind of noticed when I talk to other millennials is that you can kind of have a conversation about them having noticed how we still call them adults in our, late 20s, early 30s, the grown-ups. But having picked up on attitudes that you saw weren't so cooperative. They weren't so teamwork based. They weren't so open-minded. They weren't so sympathetic or empathetic about things. And so it's kind of like, that's what's kind of nice about the generation that always comes forth, because it's always unexpected what sympathizing degrees they've overcome from the past generations, and you kind of notice that whenever they're making fun of like the Gen Zs and Ys and stuff for being like overly sensitive. And it's kind of like, I think overly sensitive is a spin they put on the fact that they just don't want to exclude people, man. Is that so fucking like bad? That you don't want to intentionally make someone feel excluded. Like making fun and joking around is one thing. And being overly sensitive, I agree, is another thing. But I wouldn't generalize the generation, because I think it's better if you have someone who's going to be conscientious about the fact that people may find something offensive. But what I mean is, it's like, that doesn't make them fucking overly sensitive, man. It just means that like they're prepared to not let shit get out of hand, not let racism get out of hand, not let bigotry get out of hand. Because you're okay with ignoring the fact that it is a systematic problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I don't know what it is about like Gen X and I'm generalizing. I don't know.
Right.
it seems to me like the farther back in time you go, like towards the boomers, that people become less tolerant of other people's lifestyles if they're different than their own.
Right.
And I wonder what that is. Like, was there more of a separation between classes, more of a separation between people intermingling, like where they didn't get a chance to really meet someone that has a completely different set of problems than themselves?
In Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors by Carl Sagan, shout out. He had this really interesting explanation is that we'll use the word racism because of how often racism is the base of a separation point, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, yeah, maybe you could have a friend who's a different race, but you may not want your son or daughter mingling with their children. But again, anyway, there's a large spectrum there of what can be considered racist, but let's just use racism for now, is that it was used, and you see it more in the way that chimpanzees use it in the jungles, in the forests, was to maintain diversity in groups. So if your group hated that group, of course, you're never going to mingle. But what would happen is in the jungles, for example, is the female chimps would have their menstrual cycles, and they would wander at their own risk into other chimpanzee groups in the jungle. And diversity is always renders better reproduction than the same genes, as we know can have bad side effects if you're trying to match up those things. But this helped with diversity because in a way it kept the group separate and maintained it. And now you see that with the world too. Humans kind of behave in the same way. And so in history books, you see whenever you had like one race conquering another, they take women. It's not like they killed everybody. You see it in biblical writing. Mm-hmm. You slay all the men. And
commandment to take.
Sometimes it's commandment to take women. And normally, it's interesting how often commandment is also the really primitive urges of a primate anyway. But like you see how the alien woman is always very enticing to the man, and it maintains diversity. Now we have a lot of globalization, so there's no need to be racist, which is why a lot of us see that as kind of taboo now, because now you have children who are the children of two different races, who are basically people who could almost never ever be racist, so long as they were aware of the fact that their parents overcame something as totally not important as the color of your skin.
Yeah.
If
you have like, you can't be racist if hard. You have biracial parents.
Exactly. It'd be so weird. It'd be like,
it would so
it'd be strange how it would have influenced you, and it'd be weird for you to what made you agree, what convinced you. You know what I'm saying? And then which one of the races is the one you're not of you?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we're starting to have a lot more families that are interracial. And so you're starting to see racist and racism be seen more as like sort of a unnecessary, I want to say these people are evil, but
okay, sorry.
Not that I wouldn't call racism evil. I would call evil actions evil, but because of the fact of how, let's call it, racism is used in nature, now you see it as just a sort of it's a behavioral quality that can sometimes be very frustrating to deal with, and so I don't it's kind of, you gotta be careful. Racism doesn't imply that when one race hates another race and they see that race that they hate, they're gonna go do something. No, racism can also just be completely inside of you and stay inside of you and be completely silent as well. It could have loud actions, but you're not necessarily gonna get offensive words out of someone every single time. It manifests like that, but I think because of its nature, it's sort of, it'll always be easy to influence because of the way we feel comfortable being part of the right team, or let's say tribe in this case. It'll always be easy to tap into that with humans. And I think it's just something that will be taught away, and in fringe places or fringe families, you'll get a little bit of an uprising. It's kind of like when stereotypes get out of hand. It's like stereotypes they're pretty innocent, man. Like, if you don't know someone, it's totally okay for you to feel like they're a stranger. It's not just because they're a color or a race. You can feel it with the same race as you. If you don't know them, it's probably healthy for you to feel like cautious of them. It can keep you safe. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, you don't always want to confuse that kind of behavior with discriminating against someone. Like, I don't trust them just because they were this color or that color.
Yeah, it's not unethical
not always that
to
either.
not trust someone.
Exactly.
Like, if you don't know anything about them, of course you shouldn't.
It could be a totally natural reaction for you to be offhandish, like.
But it should be coming from a place of, I don't know this specific person,
right,
rather than I don't know.
They're gonna rob me.
Because of their skin color. Yeah. I'm assuming that they're gonna do this.
They're probably gonna get me, like.
Yeah.
And it's hard. We have a lot of work to do as humans.
So along that same vein, did you hear about on Friday the House? I'm pretty sure they passed a bill to legalize marijuana federally.
I was watching the vote count, but it looked like nays were above the yays.
No, the yays heavily outweighed.
Really?
The nays. Yeah. It was like 228 to 164, somewhere around there.
Okay, so they weren't done counting then when I was watching, because they were only like 5 or 6 points on top. So maybe that could have shifted.
Basically,
holy shit!
It got
passed.
It massively passed in the House, and of course the Senate is going to be the deciding factor but they're massively majority Republican. It's going to get shot down.
I think this would be an interesting demonstration of, when you pick a representative to your state, how well they represent you. Because sometimes with especially the marijuana issue, you can see a separate opinion from the people than the way the Senate voted. Mm-hmm. Their representatives. You're like, yeah, it sounds like that state wanted it legalized and the senator said no.
Yeah.
So like, it's kind of like,
well,
dude,
that's
what the fuck is going on?
The House the congressmen and women were arguing is that, look at all these states with millions and millions of people that have now voted to legalize marijuana. Mm-hmm. We need to listen to what the people want, and as our constituents. Mm-hmm. We need to listen to what they want and legalize it federally, and then go from there. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of these states have vast majority of the populations of America, like California alone. Look at how many people live there, and they voted to legalize it. So, like, let's, it's unethical. And the fact that this war on drugs has been going on for so long and disproportionately affecting Black and brown people, for so long, like, it's just needs to stop. What's the point?
That's funny. I wanted to see your take on it, because like I knew a person who had, when they were doing voting in some states about legalizing marijuana, because I think some states tried to pass it but would get voted no, and I think that's just the demographic. More old people would come out and vote. But I remember there was a person who had said that they specifically voted, although they didn't smoke or agreed with using it, but because they knew people who did, voted to legalize it because of trying to keep them out of trouble. Because they knew that they were going to use it, I might as well make sure that doesn't put them in jail. And I thought that was an interesting way to vote too, when it comes to criminalizing or decriminalizing some action. Because then it comes up to you whether you're going, shit, so they're going to like smoke a little weed, and if they get caught, they're going to put in jail for that?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
And that's what, like, Tulsi Gabbard and Kamala Harris are now like. So Tulsi Gabbard is a congresswoman, right? She's in the House.
I thought she was a congresswoman, but
I'm pretty sure she was one of the people that was like saying that it's ridiculous that people, when such a vast majority of Americans want to be using this,
they don't just try to federally make it.
That the feds can come to your house and take you away forever because you're doing this thing that a lot of people want to be doing. And they're voting to make it legal. And say what you will about Kamala Harris and her past of as
the records
putting people in prison, blah, blah, blah. Right. But she's the one in the Senate right now who's pushing really hard to get this legalized. Right. And I really respect that. Like, I know we talk a lot about how politicians like
flip-flop.
If they're at a point in their life where they can go, in the past I said this and I was wrong. Yeah. And this is how I feel now. Right. I really respect that. Because most people will just stick to their guns and they're like, oh, I can't look like I'm flip-flopping.
I agree with you. I think the absolute least they can do, but what you have to congratulate them for is when they're going back on something that was wrong in the eyes of everyone else too, was wrong. So it's like, what can I do? Be for the opposite thing that I was for.
Yeah, like,
and just support it.
As a human being, you can't say that 10 years ago or 20 years ago, you didn't feel completely different about a certain specific topic. Right. Like, our ideas and philosophies change constantly. And if you're able to evolve and progress and change your ideas based on the information that you receive throughout your life, I applaud that and respect that. Yeah. And that's why people that like pull up, things that Biden has said in like the 60s, like I get it. At the time, he was absolutely wrong about very certain things.
He could have been surrounded by people who were just even out of the reality loop too. Like as a politician, the rings of your people may not be the same as a normal human. Right. You may not be hearing the same problems on a daily basis like we would from each other, from our friends, from people who are our age.
And that's why when people say write your congressman or your senator, that's important because like you're saying, they're surrounded by this very specific group of people, just like you and I are. Like I spend my time with 3 or 4 people total. Right. So
your worldview might be based on just their opinions on everything, right?
So when you write your congressman and your senator, assuming that they're really taking what you're saying to heart,
you're letting them know.
You're bringing them into another group that they're not fully accustomed to and giving them another perspective on the world. So it is important, especially in your state, if you feel like, man, my state is always voting wrong on this or this or this. Right. Like you need to be writing your congressman. That's true. And hoping that a lot of other people are doing the same thing.
I agree with that. That's a good point too. I didn't think about it that way either.
Because that's what politics is. Like if you elect a senator or a congressman for your state to go and represent you,
you make sure they know how you feel too. Yeah.
You need to be constantly telling them, I want you to vote this way because you're sending them to vote for you. So make sure you're writing your congressman and your senator, especially if they keep voting the opposite way as you. Make sure you're letting them know we want it to be this way.
That's true because, if the only people who are writing to the senators are, let's say, a certain salary group, then again, those are the only problems being voiced to the senator versus like an overwhelmingly huge portion of people who make this bottom percent of the salary whose problems are non-existent apparently. They have no problems. They're all okay. And it seems like that. And then we start to feel like they feel like that. It's like, those people don't need anything. But so like, has anyone told them though? Has anyone let them know? And it's true. Let's be active about that. Like, write to your senators. Like, it's true. Like, this is immense power. Yeah. You have 5 friends who they themselves have like 5 friends. I'm like doing pyramid scheme here, but for like getting into politics. Yeah. Not getting into debt with a business. Pyramid schemes, bro.
but man, that would be imagine how many people are in prison right now because they were smoking a joint or like because they
just caught. They had a little tiny bit of weed.
Or they happened to be at a party where they were holding the bong when the cops walked in or whatever it was like, or they were the owner of the house or whatever it is. What they're saying in this bill is that not only will marijuana be federally legalized, but that anyone's
with criminal record of just
all
weed,
of those cases will be revisited, and anyone who's in prison right now Well, if it's a non-violent,
Yeah.
like just because they had a joint on them,
Mm-hmm,
they're getting out of prison.
Yeah. And just so
their
everyone
record
knows,
is being expunged.
and just so everyone knows, our taxes won't be paying for their meals for people who probably had a job when they got caught smoking weed.
Yep.
They were probably just already doing their thing, doing exactly what society expects them to do.
And remember that this is something Americans want. Like, it's being massively voted in. I think there's 10 states now that have all voted to legalize marijuana with gigantic populations. It's not like these rural areas with a few people living in the state.
Right.
It's
right.
a lot
Yeah.
of people that are
Yeah.
already using it
Yeah.
legally and want it.
Yeah. And like I
And
said,
it's not a
yeah.
gateway drug. It's not hurting
Yes,
anyone. It's not
exactly.
killing anyone. It's not ruining
Yeah.
families. Whatever misconceptions you've heard about this plant,
Yeah.
they're all wrong.
Yeah,
Like,
and I wanted
it's
to-
not hurting anyone.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch down. I'm not sure if you heard, but when they were going to legalize it here, I don't know if you heard like people saying, I don't know what side of the spectrum it would have been on, but like people saying like people are going to be on the streets just like drugged out, like whacked out, like they're going to be like strung out, just walking around. And
You've
and
obviously never smoked weed.
And what's interesting now is what I've noticed is not only did I see like the school here just get a huge new wing and then pavement just get done and then roads all over Colorado being fucking redone,
Mm-hmm.
but also the etiquette that pot smokers have, it's still better than etiquette that alcohol drinkers have. If you think someone watching you drink alcohol is going to influence them as easily and they're going to just automatically drink like children, it's like, well, then you have to fucking hand it to pot smokers who always fucking go out into the woods or around a corner, behind a building, outside, away,
Mm-hmm.
so they can just smoke, not only in peace to not be judged, but like
Not influence.
exactly. It's so
anyone
weird. I
else.
don't know if you've ever felt the same way, but it's like, dude, me drinking, it's so weird because the same thing, society has done the same thing to me. For some reason, I feel more okay drinking in front of kids than I do smoking. Now, why is that?
Even
I
though
should feel
kills
just as bad.
millions of people
Yeah,
a year.
I should feel just as bad drinking in front of children.
Actually, does alcohol kill millions of people a year? I don't know.
The influence it has, domestic violence, drinking and driving, it kills
Liver
a lot.
damage,
It's
like all
exactly.
that stuff combined.
It's responsible for a lot of deaths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's millions,
Yeah.
but I assume it's millions.
But that's the thing. It's like, you really do party with this. And although I do think it's weird. Human psychology is weird, but like that's just the point I wanted to make. Like the pot smokers, they definitely do not hit that thing in front of kids, man. They definitely don't. It feels weird.
Yeah.
It feels weird, and yet you can drink in front of kids, and it's weird because you don't feel bad about that, and yet this is worse.
Mm-hmm.
It is significantly worse.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how that shift works with people because people who smoke weed do that. They go out and they just...
I would love to have someone on this podcast that is a alcohol advocate and anti-marijuana. Just to
If
pick
anyone
their brain.
knows,
If anyone knows
Yeah.
anyone,
we would love to have them on. Yes.
Because that's a perspective I would love to hear.
Mm-hmm,
The fact that marijuana kills 0 people.
Mm-hmm. Statistically right now, as far as you can see,
At least from doing the drug itself. The drug itself will not hurt you in any way.
It hasn't manifested in someone's dying of a health, lung, heart, brain, anything.
You could argue the carcinogens if someone's just smoking and smoking and smoking.
Yeah,
maybe the carcinogens in your lungs would be negative to your health in some way.
I wanna mention because people might run into that experiment they did with the monkeys. Those monkeys suffocated. They didn't smoke too much weed. They smoked too much smoke and not enough oxygen. That's what happened to them, and they died. So
it was like
that's like being strangled.
Excessive
It's
hot
just like
box.
being strangled. You just didn't get enough oxygen and you died. It had
Yeah.
nothing to do with the weed.
Right. It could have been anything
It could
that
have been
was
almost
limiting
anything,
the oxygen.
Mm-hmm. Anything that would have limited the oxygen. That's right. So otherwise, unless a crate of weed has fallen on top of someone, it's really hard to find that it's killed
And
someone.
along that same line, like if marijuana was finally federally legal, imagine first of all, they could finally run tests and devote science towards
medicine.
Well, no, yes, obviously medicine, because it wouldn't be a Schedule 1 drug.
Right.
Like first, oh my God, we
Right.
could get into that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the fact that they could finally test on they could create field tests for police to determine whether or not someone is currently
High
intoxicated
or
or high.
smoked 3 days ago.
What the level of intoxication is, similar to alcohol. Like they could test your blood marijuana content level and determine whether or not you're over the threshold to be driving.
I agree, because there should be a threshold for driving. Anyone who thinks like it's chill, like dude, there's a level there. Like and including if anyone's ever drank and drive, they had a beer and then they left the bar and
It's
you're
the
totally
same
fine.
thing.
It's the same thing.
If you've had a beer and you're driving home
and you made it home, like okay, like
whatever.
Yeah,
but
whatever.
if you're smashed
if you're
and you're
smashed,
swerving all over
none
the road,
of us want you on the road.
Yeah, and if you've taken 300 milligrams of marijuana and you're driving home, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
But if you smoked 2 hours ago and you maybe feel a little bit of a highness,
you're coming down.
haziness,
Yeah.
you still have full motor controls.
It's
There should be extensive testing on that to be able to manage it in the same way that we do with alcohol, and not only for traffic violations, but like let's say at work you slip and fall, hit your head, you have to go to the hospital.
Right.
Your job is going to drug test you to determine whether or not you had anything in your system.
And they're going to fire you for smoking 20 days ago.
For 28 days ago, you smoked half a joint.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose your job and not have your medical bills paid for by work just because you smoked 28 days ago and you slip and fell maybe on some ice.
That's right.
Or something that was completely unrelated to
sober
the
or
marijuana.
not, your ass would have landed right on your fucking back.
And I think if it was federally legal, more testing would go into determining when someone is over the limit of intoxication or not, whether it's at work, traffic violations, etc.
Yeah, I agree, because as a person as a member of society, again, just because someone's a consumer doesn't mean you yourself don't have limitations. I don't want people who can't handle it just fucking being out there.
Yeah.
It's different, like if you know someone who's got high tolerance, but the same. Drinking and driving, we have the statistics and they're terrible. We don't want them to be on weed either. We need to be careful, and we need to be better about it. And
as a hiring manager, like, do you really fully agree with that if you hire a great candidate with exceptional experience and skills, they ace the interview, they do a pre-employment drug test, and they just barely cross that threshold of having some kind of THC in their system from 20 days ago.
And you're like, fuck.
So you can't hire that person.
But you can hire an alcoholic who doesn't smoke weed.
They could have been out binge drinking the night before that interview or the night before that drug test. And it won't make a difference, even though they're destroying their liver. Yeah. They're potentially like
dangerous at work,
hurting their family. If they drove home, they were putting people in danger. It's just the way that we perceive this drug is all wrong. And I'm glad to see that at least the majority of the Congress is now pushing for that. Because I think even if it doesn't get passed on this round, I think it's only a matter of time now before maybe 5-10 years at the max before we're finally at that level where we wake up as a society.
I thought it was interesting because you said the way we perceive this drug. It's funny because I hear it get called drug and substance. Can you imagine if you said the way we perceive this plant needs to be changed?
It's
kind of crazy, right? It's kind of crazy, right? The more the attitude change you have towards it, because like, man, it does get fucking thrown around in there as if it's like a Tylenol pill.
Right.
But it's like 13 Tylenol pills will fucking kill you.
Right.
13 joints, something a fucking stoner does in one day.
And the fact, like, we didn't even get into the whole opioid crisis or how we're just dumping pills down people's throats and killing them and destroying their families at the federal level. And yet this plant that isn't hurting anyone is a Schedule 1 drug that can't even be tested on to determine its medical value. Right. Like, holy shit. Yeah.
I think it's going to save a lot of money when you can test on it. And you know what? Even for regular users, I think we can all get behind what the science would say. If there's anything harmful about it, I think a lot of us would adjust our consumption.
In the same way we
habits.
use alcohol. Like, you shouldn't be drinking constantly all day, every day.
Exactly.
If it was determined that marijuana is really bad for
Right.
you if you're using it
Yeah.
constantly,
Right.
of course,
People will take steps.
there should be
Yeah.
guidelines on
Yeah.
your bottle or your
Yeah.
case of marijuana.
Not all of these not approved by the FDA stickers
Yeah.
all over the place.
The same way that on your bottle of, Oxycontin,
Mhm.
it says how much to use
You know,
and when and
It makes
why.
me. I was just thinking. What do you think? Okay, I'll just use one example, but we can probably fuck around with a couple.
We
this-
have like 2 minutes.
Okay,
left, by the way.
cool. In this hypothetical situation, the government will negotiate legalize one thing and make something else illegal. Do you think people would easily switch energy drinks for marijuana? Energy
Wait.
drinks illegal, marijuana legal? If you could negotiate,
I don't think people would.
you don't think people would switch
No.
legality of weed over legality of energy drinks?
Well, based on the people
I
that
know-
are in
I know
charge
that I
making
would
the
because-
decisions now.
No, I know
you
that,
and I
yeah,
would.
No, that's what I mean.
obviously.
That's what I mean. Well, how do you think the people would vote on that product to the other product? Because based on the people I know, I feel like I know more people who may
Yeah.
use more weed than
Everyone I know would probably vote
Prefer
in the
weed
direction
over.
of having weed be legal rather than
because
energy drink.
I just wanted to use energy drink as an example because I knew a guy from Hungary who said that in Hungary Red Bull is prohibited. It's not sold.
Wow,
Yeah, it's not
that's
sold.
a smart decision. I mean,
think so too.
if it's killing people,
On a health basis, like if it's something that contributes to like stress and like being maniacal
yeah.
throughout the day, then maybe it's something you want to think about. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're out of time for today. Thank you guys for listening. If you have any thoughts on our conversation, drop a comment.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think.
And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. And yeah, just let us know. What was that person we were looking for? Pro alcohol.
Oh, yeah. If you know anyone that's pro-alcohol and anti-marijuana,
Anti-marijuana.
we would love to have them on the podcast.
Yes.
So please get them in touch with us. You can reach us at themillennialexperience@gmail.com. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, everyone.
Peace out.
Bye.
What we found